So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on rules and best practices for branch meetings. My name's Xavier Martin, and with me this evening, I have several of our key professional officers: Annabel Johnson, our CEO, Gracia Kusuma, our Head of Workplace Relations and the Company Secretary, and Kathy Rankin, Head of Policy and Advocacy. So on our agenda this evening is going to be the overview of our structure and the role of branch meetings, organising and running an effective branch meeting, the conduct of elections, successful chairing techniques, policy development and annual conference resolutions, empowering branches, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A session. And please submit any questions you have through the chat box on your toolbar. You'll find the bubble there to click on and get a drop-down box. So thank you for that. Now, the first speaker for me to introduce is Gracia on the New South Wales Farmers structure and role of branch meetings. Please, Gracia.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Xavier. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the time that you're spending with us. For the next hour, I have the pleasure of taking you through an overview of New South Wales Farmers structure and where branches fit within that structure. Branches connect members to New South Wales Farmers' broader decision-making processes, amplifying grassroots voices and strengthening the association's role as a leader in the ag sector. They also play a crucial role in activating local initiatives, addressing regional issues, and driving engagement at the grassroots level. By providing a strong network of support, advocacy, and involvement, branches are vital in attracting and retaining members. Now, the diagram that you see on the PowerPoint slide here may seem slightly complex, but essentially it shows how our structure is interconnected, and at the basis of it is how members are organized in branches. Now, all members are allocated to a particular branch. The branch can be based on geographical location, or we also have some branches that are commodity specific, based on geographical location as well. And branches, through their annual meeting, elect and send delegates to annual conference, and influence the agenda for annual conference through the motions that branches submit within that process. And as a result of proceedings at annual conference, then there's the election of board and executive council, and subsequently executive council elects members of the advisory committees, which are then progressing through the policy motions and the advocacy work of the association. Members who produce specialized commodities such as oyster, pork, fruit, and veg can also be part of the specialist Section 29 committees through that process. Now, in terms of meetings, meetings for branches are the forum in which branches operate, make decisions, and discuss key issues. Now, there are generally two types of meetings: ordinary meetings as well as branch annual meetings. Branch annual meetings tend to be stricter in terms of the rule that applies, because that is the provision of our constitution. Now, for the ordinary branch meetings, essentially the function of that includes facilitating flow of information between the association and members, both ways, where it provides the opportunity for members to learn about key issues, advocacy strategies, or recent developments from head office, but it also provides a feedback mechanism where members provide feedback, share information, and raise concerns. It's also an opportunity for networking, social events, fostering connections between members with other stakeholders, or with commercial partners of the association. And also importantly, there's local autonomy on issues that branches can resolve through discussion and having a decision made within the meeting. Also planning and coordination of local events, campaigns, initiatives, so on and so forth. There is a minimum notice required for 7 days notice to call for a branch meeting. Now, to call an annual meeting, there's longer notice that is required. It's 14 days, and there are certain quorum requirements that apply. There's required matters to be discussed at an annual meeting, including submission of annual report, reporting of the branch balance sheet by the treasurer, and election of branch office bearers and branch delegates to annual conference. Now, annual conference motion can be determined as part of the general business in an annual meeting, or it can also be part of decision items in an ordinary branch meeting. Ordinarily, I think branches hold an annual meeting, and then immediately after, certain branches also hold their ordinary meeting straight after. Now, annual meeting conducted by branches in terms of the process. The annual meeting is a precursor to the conduct of annual conference, as the participants and agenda for annual conference are determined by the branch structure. So that is, in a nutshell, where branches sit within our structure, as well as the functions of the two types of meetings. I will hand over to our president, Xavier Martin, to discuss the planning and running efficient meetings, as well as elections, the conduct of elections during meetings. Over to you, Xavier.
Thank you very much, Gracia. And I do want to speak to you about the following slides. Will have a series of dot points on them. However, my notes will probably range around some of these issues, and I can't overemphasize at the outset the importance of planning. It's axiomatic, really, that the better you plan a meeting, the more likely it is that you're going to get a satisfactory or productive outcome. And to the extent that our members, and indeed I think rural and regional people at large, are keen for structure and good process, you know, in other words, they're really over the shoutiest voice in the room determining these activities, they really appreciate a well-planned meeting. Sure, they don't all appreciate that there are routine matters like dealing with apologies and minutes, but the concept that there are important issues that are dealt with methodically is one that increasingly I find our members really value. So in brief, it's their meeting, the members' meeting, and consulting your secretary and indeed your regional service manager to determine the plan and plan the meeting is a must-do. The next point I want to mention is that as chair, it's important to create a friendly atmosphere and effectively host the attendees at your branch meeting. You know, arriving early and personally welcoming guests and new members is an important aspect of your role. Showing your interest in people will go a long way into creating a feeling of belonging right from the start. And starting on time and finishing on time are both really important aspects of a well-planned meeting. I mean, for a start, people don't like hanging around an indeterminate amount of time when they've arrived on time. And by the same token, we don't want our members saying, well, I've got no idea how long this meeting's going to go, and the last one went on for way too long. So it is really important for branches and for you as a chair to have a clear view, a clear plan around what time you're going to start and what time you've got to finish. And don't be afraid to delegate to your vice chair or not even a member to wait for a guest. If the guest's running late, that's no reason for you not to commence the meeting. Always in your planning, imagine the progress of the meeting in your mind and think through the issues and problems which could arise, and consider how you would treat those possibilities, and even have your own private timetable. So you've got some idea of where you're at in the meeting. Yes, it's important to follow the agenda you've agreed with your secretary and potentially your RSM, but introducing business or general business and dealing with introduced business, unless it's critically urgent, should be dealt with on the or after the completion of the written agenda. If you know there's a burning issue, and certainly I've seen a branch meeting where, you know, they thought there was 10 members coming and the local shire kindly released a special rate variation a few days before the branch meeting met, and instead of 10 turning up, there was about 110. So when there's a burning issue, it is always important to outline to members attending just how the discussions will be dealt with, and it's appropriate in that circumstance to give a brief statement of the background of how the meeting will be conducted and how the burning issue will be dealt with. Conversely, some meetings, you know there's issues, but there's a wariness on behalf of some members to represent the issues. So you have to be practiced in drawing those issues out. You know, try to identify those problems and identify facts that might help, and even practical alternatives can come from the chair. But again, it's their meeting, not your meeting. So you've really just got to help with suggestions around the alternatives, the facts, the best solutions. Even after the discussions commenced, you can start refining a principle and then allow the debate to take it towards the detail. And sometimes you'll find it will result in a composite motion, which you'll then have to break into parts. So on one hand, you're trying to draw things together, but on the other hand, sometimes as they are assembled, it may be the case that you've then got to deal with the separate parts in separate votes or in seriatim. So if your secretary's not doing it, please try and consider how you keep a concise summary, because at the end, members need to be clear on what they are voting on. And so it's important that you've got at least a record of what is being put forward, appropriately moved, appropriately seconded, and encourage any members that perhaps you've noticed paying attention, but, you know, perhaps not confident enough to contribute. Just always watch carefully where someone might want to ask a question or make a contribution. If questions or process becomes difficult, it's important that you rule on how things are to be dealt with and explain those rulings politely, and speak distinctly and with deliberation. And even if the vote, you know, becomes quite negative or critical, it's always important to thank the members participating so that they realise that it is all part of the process, win, lose or draw, on amendments or a substantive resolution. But it does come back to you as chair to keep the discussion on track and keep the interests of other members, you know, the focus, not allow long-winded speakers, and time limits are important aspects that can be considered before the opening of debate. Because again, if there's a poor experience by members, they're less likely to come back. It's important that you think through the introduction of guest speakers, or at least allocate that task to your vice chair or another member if you don't feel you can do the introduction of that major speaker, that guest, appropriately. I think the point of function does come down to properly moving. When you've got a proper resolution that's been put before the meeting, it's better to debate it at that point than allow long-winded discussion and debate before you get to a resolution. However, sometimes an issue does have to be socialised before you get to a discussion on the matters. So be elastic, but be firm when you are making a ruling and making a decision. Sometimes you're better to make a firm decision in error, and then it crystallises whether the members agree with it or not. So as chair, you should refrain from debating or making speeches during a debate. You're really there to adjudicate or to listen, and that is a really important role. And I've got some more notes here about those characteristics that I just want to run through with you. The important attributes of a good chair are impartiality, firmness, tact, and common sense. Other useful qualities are courtesy, patience, fairness, self-control, tolerance, confidence, reasonableness, consistency, an orderly mind, and a sense of humour. Now, none of us have got all of that, but, you know, if we can at least focus on the breadth of those issues, those traits, if you like, that a chair should have, and avoid any tendencies to be sarcastic or to seek to humiliate or embarrass or ridicule or even lecture other speakers or members. A good chair needs to respect the members and appreciate that the right of truth and free speech are seldom only on one side, and that free speech really extends generally throughout the room. So a good chair knows when to enforce the rules strictly and when some relaxation can be tolerated. A good chair will always keep his or her temper and use good humour to relieve a tense situation. Obviously, a chair should know how to run a meeting and how best to handle people, but none of us are perfect, as I've said a moment ago. So thinking through this planning and these things I'm raising with you this evening are important. At the end of the day, our reputation, all of us as a chair, rides on impartiality and the good progress and process and getting a good outcome in a speedy manner. And I'll come to some points in a moment about how to crack a meeting along if need be. But the things that are done from the floor, such as moving, seconding, or speaking to motions, keeping those basics right are what members, what all people value. So I encourage you to think through those aspects of chairing. So I've touched on, this is slide 2, I've got through that. So I just want to deal with some issues about speeding up meetings. Sorry, the
Conduct of election.
Oh, the conduct of elections. Yes. So within our association, we have a branch meeting guide, and it's been refreshed at the moment, and you'll soon see it distributed. All our RSMs also have an election, how to conduct election guide, and the key parts of that are going to be attached to the branch guide. So that will come out. The conduct of elections is a very important part of our democracy, and getting it done efficiently and effectively without offence is really, really important. So there's a lot of goodwill in our members. For a start, we're all associating together, and there's a lot of goodwill in all our professional officers, including our RSMs, to get the job done effectively. The problem is often an inadvertent one or unforeseen one, where poor process results in, can result in offence, and in the worst cases, I've seen it erode branches' reason for existence. So it is important that conducting elections for our office bearers is done in a measured and methodical way, so that the process actually delivers satisfactory. They're not always contested elections, but if they are, there's an additional set layer of process to make sure that all risks are minimised. So please look out for that refreshed branch guide, branch meeting guide, and the issues around or the attachment around conducting elections, because that is important. So pardon me, I'll go to the speeding up meetings. So I think I've dealt with the issues around good order and reputation and protecting free speech, debates with structure, quality, and speeding up meetings. Yes. So what I want to talk to you about is one of the major criticisms of any meeting is, it took too long. So there are considerable range of methods available to a chair to increase the efficiency of a meeting, speed up the decision-making process without detracting significantly from the output. In fact, sometimes it makes sure that all members go home having known their issues being dealt with in a good process. So we've already covered off on planning, and that is probably the thing that helps speed it up the most, is to have a structured agenda where I referred to earlier, you have time to deal with the matters. But what I want to go to now is this judgment you need to exercise about debating time and suggesting alterations that might make the more urgent and relatively important items to be dealt with up front in the total time available. So helping the meeting to find a suitable form of words can be a good method. So in other words, if you know there's a key issue, thinking about what might be the suitable form of words for a resolution before you even arrive at the meeting is an important part of planning. If you know that controversial matters are likely to bring about a whole range of different remarks or tedious repetition or long-winded contributions, one of the best ways to head that off is to raise up front that you'll be listening carefully for relevance, for repetition, and for the length of contribution, so that it's not a shock to individuals when you start to say, well, look, with respect, we've heard that before, we do need to move on, and I'm not hearing new information. So allow debate, but then if you're hearing repetition, if you're hearing irrelevant remarks, bring it to a close. Do not allow unimportant matters to be discussed at length. It shouldn't take long to talk about the pothole on the edge of the bridge or whatever. They're the sort of things that should not take up a large amount of time. There is always the option of working with experienced members who are good at constructing resolutions from the floor to, at least in perhaps before the meeting convenes, encouraging them to think through what a draft resolution might look like. So even if they're not the main cooperator or instigator of a matter of urgency, they're at least assisting the meeting. And don't be afraid at an appropriate point to suggest to the meeting that the matter under discussion needs to be brought to a close. And one of the best ways of doing that is to foreshadow that you are going to give the mover of the resolution the right of reply. So that then focuses on all those attending on whether there's new information to be added or not. Now, I think that covers off what I had, Gracia. So I now need to hand over to Kathy to address us on the policy development and annual conference motions. Thank you, Kathy.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you all for attending. We really value the time that you are contributing to be part of this discussion. My job this afternoon is just to provide an overview of the policy development process and also help to support the branches if you have any questions around motion submission, motion development. In essence, policies are developed, debated and endorsed by New South Wales Farmers members, as you are the foundation of our policy and advocacy. It's the passion of our branches and members that leads our policy development process. We would not be New South Wales Farmers without this passion and engagement. In the main, most of our policy debate is undertaken at annual conference, and the organisation's intent is to maximise the opportunity for our members via your elected delegates to highlight issues and inform New South Wales Farmers policy and advocacy through this debate. In order to have this good debate, we seek the branches to think carefully in their preparation and submission of policy motions. The motions are developed, or the majority of motions are developed at branches at your annual general meetings, or can also be developed at ordinary meetings where a quorum is achieved. For motions to be considered at annual conference, they need to be submitted to head office electronically by Friday, the 5th of May this year. These motions, when they are received after the 5th of May, are reviewed by the policy team and policy committees against existing policy, and they are then sent to and considered by the Board Agenda Committee. The Board Agenda Committee is a subcommittee of the board, usually comprising the President, the Vice President, and another member. And they look at and consider the motions as they have come in and check them for accuracy, currency, etc. Following this review, the branches are advised if their motion has been accepted, not accepted, or if the Agenda Committee would like to suggest amendments to either some of the wording or some of the focus, and also if there may be multiple motions that are similar, if they could be combined. All motions, and there will be feedback through the policy team to the branches regarding the outcome of the Board Agenda Committee review, and all of those motions will be finalised by 7th of June 2025. We encourage the branches to provide feedback and engage with our staff during this process so that we can ensure that we are actually meeting the intent and the expectation of the motions. I've just identified 2 dates, and on the screen there are 3 dates. I'm not expecting you to remember those dates from here. So what we will do is, as is usual practice, send member alerts to the branch office bearers, and that will be in the next couple of weeks to provide further detail on the deadlines that I've outlined, and along with a link to the JOP form on which the motion should be submitted. I'd like to flag that New South Wales Farmers Policy staff, regional service managers, executive councillors and members of our policy committees are always available to aid the branches should you wish to check any existing policy and understand what actions might be currently underway, potentially against the issue that you are raising. New South Wales Farmers Policy that are already endorsed for action are always available. New South Wales Farmers Policies already endorsed for action can be found in the policy statement book that is available on the website, and there will also be a link to that in the member alerts that go out. In developing for consideration the motions for annual conference or for finalisation and development into our policy booklet, I'd like to flag just a few things for you to consider. First of all, and most importantly, we are a farmer representative organisation. So it's important that the motions that are developed promote the development of pastoral and agricultural industries and all matters relating to pastoral and agricultural production. That wording is taken from our Constitution, and that really sort of sets the agenda for the key issues and the key focus of our work. The second thing is the issue already covered by existing New South Wales Farmers Policy? And as I've said previously, you can check that against our statement book. Third, will the outcome of prosecuting the issue result in changes to the principles of existing government or industry policy? Or will they have a significant impact on established programs or projects that are long-standing positions of government. Fourth, is the motion concise and clearly worded? And most importantly, is it supported by an evidence base that outlines the value of the motion and the value to agriculture, either increasing productivity or removing regulatory or legislative barriers? We also encourage the branches to consider that the motion will provide a broader benefit to the organisation rather than a local issue response. If it's local, it may be more appropriate for activation by the individual branch. But again, members of EC, policy staff and regional service managers are able to provide support for that information. And I think most importantly, the last question that we should be asking is the intent of the motion achievable? All motions must have background included so that conference delegates can have informed debate. That's the most important thing of the motion discussion process. I also would like to flag that the number of motions able to be debated at annual conference is limited due to available time. Motions that are considered by branches to be critical may also be submitted to Executive Council for debate at one or two of its meetings held in March and then September, October of each year. Additionally, while it might sound that we have some process for formed meetings, we also recognise that issues will be raised and will come to prominence at various times during the year. So we also have a process whereby should issues that are critical and key to be actioned within a short time frame, they can also be submitted for EC for consideration out of session. That's a very brief and quick overview of a fair bit of information in there. But I wanted to provide that overview so that if there are any questions or further information that you would like that the policy team or members of Executive Council or Xavier or members of the board may be able to provide support for you. That's the end of my prepared remarks. I'd like to now hand over to our CEO, Annabel, to speak a little bit further about empowering branches. Thanks, Annabel.
Thanks, Kathy. A great strength of New South Wales farmers is that our policy reflects the issues and solutions that our grassroots members want. And branches play a critical role in making sure that this happens through engaging members. So as Xavier outlined, we're looking at giving you the tools to ensure that you are having success. That's going to start with communications, but there's one tool that I wanted to outline that's been a source of questions since I've come into this role over and over again, and I have seen that someone's put it in as a question through tonight. And the question, of course, is when can we get access to member lists? So a bit of history. The member list did used to be distributed, and that was stopped due to security concerns around handing out member lists without any controls put in place. So we recognised that made it very difficult for you to do your job as branch executives, because how were you meant to understand who were current members, what their membership was, and to communicate effectively with them? So I'm very pleased to announce that we have found a solution to that. And in mid-February, we will be launching a portal that you will have access to on the New South Wales Farmers website. And through that, you'll be able to gain access to who are the current members, who are the lapsed members, see the membership types. So who's a farmer member, who's a supporter, who's a small landholder, and also see the contact details of members. Now, to make sure that we're doing this responsibly and ensuring we're protecting our members' data, you will need to go through and agree to certain protocols around confidentiality for accessing. Now, we have had a number of people on this call testing to pilot it and make sure that it is a simple process that will give you access to the information that will enable you to build a stronger branch. Because we know that you as members are going to be very effective in being able to convert non-members, because you know the benefits that New South Wales Farmers offers your business. So we're testing the portal now, and we'll be looking at launching in mid-February. So that won't be in time for all branch meetings, but it will be in time for the majority of branch meetings. So this is something that we are passionate about, making sure that our branches are empowered. And a key part of that is not just us sharing information with you, but also you having the capacity to share and learn from each other. We have some branches doing some fantastic initiatives across the state to communicate critical local issues and also drive membership. So we're looking at what are the opportunities for those branches to be able to share their learnings with you so that you can drive your branch and grow the membership of New South Wales farmers. So look, I think, thank you everyone that has joined. That ends the formal presentations. And what we'd like to do now is open it up for questions and answers. So
Thanks, Annabel. And look, I think you've dealt with Richard Taylor's point in the chat room. So thank you for outlining that. And I know members have said to me they're really looking forward to, office bearers, I should say, are really looking forward to being able to better coordinate their branches with an understanding and the improvement of just who is a member and what type of member they are to run their branches better. So thank you for making progress on that, Annabel. Now we've got a question and answer, a question from Debbie Platts, and it reads that our branch needs a refresh and revitalisation. Membership is dwindling and people struggle to find a reason to be a member. I need support to turn this around. I find it frustrating that I have to communicate with members through the RSM. The few ideas and reasons for meeting have not been supported, so nothing has happened. Now, Debbie, I appreciate your point, and I've been there and done that. I've seen it before. I want to help you turn it around too. For a start, I'm not sure which branch you are, but if I can coordinate it in my calendar, I'll be there to help you meet your members and potential members.
From Bega branch.
From Bega, yeah. Well, I need to get there and work with Debbie. But the other thing is that what Annabel has outlined in terms of your access as an office bearer is going to help you enormously, I would suggest, in identifying the key people and key potential members, people who would be members. I know that Bega is going to have plenty of issues, so it's just a matter of addressing them and discovering the solutions for your members and potential members, and we'll have a revitalised branch. So look, happy to work with you, please. Okay.
There's another question, Chair, from Amanda Barlow. Who can you suggest as a guest speaker for the annual meeting?
Well, that's a really good question, Amanda, because you might recall in my presentation, I talked about the importance of starting on time and finishing on time. So in an annual meeting, you're always got the formal part of the process, which involves not just minutes of the last AGM and apologies being accepted, but it does involve a treasurer's report, a chair's report, and the elections. So that sometimes doesn't leave a whole lot more time in the evening, given that most farmers are not wanting to make a long night of it. So my point to you would be that as a guest speaker at an AGM, once those annual matters are dealt with, and most branches then close their AGM and open a general meeting, which can facilitate a guest speaker at that point. It's usually wise, in my experience, to try and pick a guest speaker who is addressing a contemporary issue. Now, one I'm seeing quite a bit lately is with a lot of our local government areas seeking special rate variations. I'm finding that local government office bearers, whether they're councillors or professional staff, are often invited to address the members, obviously as ratepayers, in that LGA. So I'd have to say to you at the moment, that seems to be a top of the pops type local guest speaker. To the extent we have other guest speakers, obviously we have a key relationship with WFI, and WFI is very good at putting forward some of their regional staff to address meetings on invitation. So look, happy to talk to you directly about other potential guest speakers, Amanda. Is there anyone else wants to comment on that one?
And only in that, thank you, Xavier. The only thing is just to reinforce, we're also hearing that there's a number of issues, not only rate variation issues, but new policies and procedures that are coming from local government that are causing concern. And one of the real values of being able to speak to local decision makers, and I'll put that in inverted commas, is that you can actually sort of test what the issue is, and so therefore help to inform if there's further policy that might be worthwhile developing and highlighting to the organisation that we could take on a statewide level, as well as underpinning what you're doing locally.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that, Kathy. So I think the next question might have been, is it just a comment there from Debbie Platts that I like the idea of knowing what other branches are considering as major issues, and can we share this somehow? So Debbie, over the decades, the main way we've shared that has been by the executive councillors from your region turning up at your meetings and speaking about the major issues from other meetings. Now, I appreciate some executive councillors, well, they vary in terms of their attendance at branch meetings. Now, to the extent they're expected to, doesn't mean they actually do. And look, I think apart from the annual conference, where, you know, there's a reasonable level of publicity, certainly to your delegates getting the compendium for annual conference and seeing what the issues are, what you're referring to is you'd like more real-time knowledge of the major issues that are being considered, and indeed the solutions, I guess, you'd be interested in too, in relation to those major issues. Annabel, I guess to some extent we do cover off in our media releases our progress around key matters. I guess Farm Post also does refer to some of those elements on foot, but perhaps we do need to consider more the report post-EC, post-Executive Council, as well as post-annual conference in the farm magazine, our farmer magazine. What do you think?
I think it's a really, really good point around how we get better at sharing information. So, unfortunately, Debbie, I don't, I think the suggestions that Xavier's had, sort of teasing it out, is really important. But I think it's one that we need to tease out more, and look at what might be solutions. I think with this, we're going to have to. There's going to be a lot of things that we'll identify and we'll want to do, and it's just doing them in a staged way. Because I always say this: I'd much prefer to do 2 things well than 10 things poorly. So it's about making sure that we nail things and get them up and running. But it's great to see that there is interest in how we share that information around, so that other branches see what's happening. So we've got a few elements, but I think we can work on how we can strengthen that.
Yeah, thanks, Annabel. So the next question is from Ferna Bag. What should we do if a mining company rep turns up to a meeting uninvited, particularly a lawyer for the company, and a mining company has just purchased land in our area and set up their own pastoral company? So thank you, Ferna, for that question. And look, I have run into this or similar circumstances before. I mean, the important thing is to discover whether they are a full producer member, because to the extent they are or aren't, there's rights attached to that role. Now, you say they've set up a pastoral company, but that doesn't necessarily qualify them as a prime producer. And to the extent they may not be, they may be some other type of member, an associate member. They may be entitled to observe at the meeting, but not participate in a vote or even speak in debate. So it's an issue that we need to be alert to, and to the extent that their lawyers turning up, we need to be quite clear that we do not allow third parties to carry proxies on behalf of members. The actual member carries the voting rights and the right to speak and move resolutions, etc. So look, please, happy to interact with you over that matter and get clarification, or your RSM can definitely help you, your regional service manager.
That's related to this, I think.
So, okay, there's another, but wasn't the next one from Colin McIntyre?
There is, but in terms of voting rights, I think it's irrelevant.
This one relates to it. So it's from Deborah Willis, re-voting rights at branch meetings. Many members are unaware of their voting rights. Full members only allowed to vote. Membership lists are needed. Yeah, thank you, Deborah. That's reinforcing the point, because whilst chairs and secretaries are very inclusive people, we all arrive at the meeting with goodwill. The reality is those that don't have full producer membership do not have voting rights at that meeting. Now we'll go back to Colin McIntyre from Coffs Harbour. Why do we need to use our regional service managers to announce meeting dates? We should be able to send, and now we don't get who has said that. Yeah, the RSVP. So thank you, Colin. I think the point is the regional service manager has access to the email addresses or postal addresses of all members in your branch area. And that's the key point, that in planning your meeting with your secretary and determining a date, it's important to interact with the RSM to get agreement that that's the date and time and purpose, whether it's a AGM or a general meeting or both. Annabel, is there any other reason why the RSMs need to be involved at that point than the communication with members?
I think it's also making sure that it's sort of sent out at the right time of 7 days or 14 days, so it is a properly constituted meeting. That's another critical element that before my time with the organisation, but my understanding was that, you know, and this is all hearsay of what I've been told, but there were issues around those dates not being met. So I think it's, you know, it's an interesting point, but it's sort of these sort of points that are useful in, you know, from what I'm taking it is Cole wants to, you know, you want to understand who's turning, who's not able to attend. So yeah, how do we make sure that information flows through to chairs?
Yeah, thank you, Annabel. And Colin, you've also got a supplementary point here around, can you re-show the first screen, which we should be able to do in a moment, and should we declare all positions vacant at the start of an AGM and appoint an election officer or a returning officer, I guess is what you're referring to. So Colin, the answer to that is the whole procedure will be laid out effectively in the branch meeting manual. Regional service managers have it at the moment, this election procedure. And look, there is a point in an annual general meeting where you declare all positions vacant, but it's not at the start. I mean, at the start, you're welcoming, you are dealing with apologies, you are dealing with the minutes of the last AGM, not the last general meeting. And you are also then moving to the chair's report and the treasurer's report. And often there's a resolution in the annual meeting to claim capitation fees, which is a proportion of member subscriptions that come back to the branch. So there's a number of other, if you like, procedural matters that need to be dealt with. And so you're actually quite well through the AGM before you declare, whoever's in the chair declares all positions vacant and hands over to, and this is where our regional service managers can offer to facilitate the election process. And that is the nomination and the process is laid out. So hopefully that explains that question. Now, the next one is from Craig Huff. How do you balance the chair communicating the information he or she has gathered as the leader of the branch and your earlier comment for the chair not to steer the discussion? I feel you need to make a recommendation to the branch based on all the information and sometimes don't have time to communicate all that information. Thank you, Craig. That's a really important point, and I agonised on my notes for this evening as to whether I needed to go into this element. And I think it's really important where a chair feels strongly about a matter or has strong information about a matter that needs to be communicated, that is foreshadowed to the meeting soon after the welcome, really, when you're dealing with the adoption of the agenda, outlining the agenda. And it's often it is an excellent practice for a chair to say to the assembled members that when it comes to, for example, the special rate variation, where I, personally I'm very affected, or I have a strong view, or I know a lot about this issue, that I will vacate the chair and invite my vice chair to take it so I can contribute from the floor. And that way you can separate yourself from that impartiality that you need to exercise as chair. So that's by far the best method, is to foreshadow that and to actually achieve that, not wait till part of the way through the discussion or the debate and then say, oh, look, I've got something to say now. I know a lot about this. I've got the facts. That really undermines the confidence and impartiality and the value of the meeting to those assembled, to the members assembled. So I hope I've explained that to you. And look, it's probably a good opportunity to say, to reinforce that our branch meeting process, our role of branch office bearers, really lays all this out quite well. And for those of you that really enjoy getting into the detail of good process and good structured meetings, like I do, there's Renton's rules, and they play a key part in our charter and rules and constitution. And Nick Renton has been writing for decades. I don't know how many iterations he's up to now, but I can thoroughly recommend that he's got all the permutations of these issues around running a good meeting, Craig. So hopefully I've answered that for you. Now, is there further?
There was a further question, but that's quite technical, just in terms of minimum notice required for the meeting. And also the request for the slide was this slide, so it's being shared. But in terms of notice of meeting, the time frame of 7 days or 14 days notice, that's just the minimum notice required. Certainly notice can be provided for longer. And if a longer period of notice is, as in the first invitation is sent out sometime before that, we just suggest that a reminder is also sent closer to the meeting date, just to remind members that a meeting is coming up. What we find is sometimes a text reminder or a phone call reminder from the chair is most effective.
And office bearers, I must relate to you that in my experience over many decades with our branch meetings, and certainly over recent years through COVID, and to the point that I'm, an average age farmer now, and so there's as many older than me apparently as younger than me. A lot of our members really appreciate hybrid meetings, and certainly with appropriate notice, our regional service managers can largely accommodate that, and that has been really appreciated by members who are struggling with face-to-face attendance, whether it's because of health issues or a related party's health issues. There's sometimes a carer. So please take into consideration that it is so important to get a quorum, because that otherwise all you're dealing with is an informal discussion. So to get to a quorum, if there's concern about attendance levels, please consider a hybrid meeting. I think that's been a good learning from this new tech age. Now, colleagues, is there anything else? I'm looking at the clock and thinking I need to finish on time, because that's what I like to do.
We are quite close to on time. We are 2 minutes away from 7 o'clock.
Right.
Chair.
Well,
any other questions?
There isn't any other questions in the chat box.
No, there's not.
I always like to to have a minute or two up our sleeve. But so I'd like to thank, here we go. We've got something from Craig, have we? From Craig Huff. Can we please have a text reminder from head office database about 4 hours before the meeting? When this has happened in the past, we've had a few people who had forgotten. So is that something we've offered in the past to update? Do RSMs do that, or?
We will need to take the idea on notice to consider, because there are certain cost implications and also implications on how frequent we do that, since there's rules around spamming. So some of these things definitely great ideas, but we'll need to consider this further. So we'll take it on notice and we'll consider the potential implications. But if there are no significant implications, perhaps we can implement.
And thank you for raising that, Craig. And look, it's the sort of point that Far North Coast branch, your branch, might have as a resolution for EC or annual conference about a communication update. So please consider that. Hopefully that addresses it.
Yes.
So members, office bearers, professional staff, thank you very much for your attendance this evening and working through our kit of rules and best practices for branch meetings. And I wish you all well. I'll hopefully see the majority of you as we work through our branch meeting season or peak season in the run up to Executive Council and then annual conference. Thank you all, and I wish you a happy and successful 2025. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone.